Mara had lived in the valley for only 3 months, yet everyone already knew her as the giant bride. People did not call her this to make fun of her. It was simply the truth that she was much taller, much stronger, and much broader than the people who lived in the farming valley. She came from a far mountain tribe where people grew big because of the cold winds, heavy work, and food from the high hills. But despite her big size, she carried a quiet nature, almost too gentle for someone with her strength. When she first arrived after her marriage, the valley was curious. Children peeked from behind fences, whispering. Women watched her from doorways, wondering what kind of life she had lived before coming here. Men nodded politely when she walked by, careful not to stare too long at her tall frame. Mara tried to smile at everyone, though her smile was small, almost shy. She hoped she would blend in, but it was clear that blending in was impossible when she was a full head taller than the tallest man in town. Her husband, Cole, was a middle-aged trader with a rough beard and a tired look in his eyes. He had spent years traveling between settlements, selling tools, cloth, and spices. When he returned one day with a new bride, people assumed he had found love on his travels. But the truth was different. Cole had chosen Mara mostly because he needed help on his land and believed her strength would make farm work easier. Mara, on the other hand, believed she would find a new home and start a warm family with him. Their hopes had never matched. From the moment Mara stepped into Cole's small wooden house, she could feel a distance. He never greeted her kindly, never sat with her for meals, and never asked about her day. He walked ahead of her when they traveled and never waited for her to catch up. He slept on his side of the bed, facing the wall, and some nights he slept outside on the porch for no clear reason. Mara tried to ignore these things, thinking maybe he was shy or needed time. But as days turned into weeks, she realized something painful. Her husband did not see her as a partner. He saw her as a helper, someone to carry heavy sacks, chop firewood, and fix fences. She tried her best because that was in her nature. But inside she felt something slowly breaking. Every morning she woke up early to prepare breakfast, hoping Cole would sit with her just once. But he always took his food and walked outside to eat alone. When she cooked special meals from her mountain tribe, hoping he would show interest, he barely looked at the food. She often lay awake at night, wondering what she had done wrong. She thought maybe she was too big, too strange, or too different. She tried wearing softer clothes, tying her hair differently, learning the valley's cooking style, everything she could think of. But nothing worked. The valley people noticed her sadness even when she tried to hide it. She walked with her head slightly bowed, shoulders tense, and her steps careful, as if she did not want to disturb anyone. Yet she was always helpful. She lifted fallen wagons, carried barrels for elderly neighbors, and helped fix roofs after storms. People admired her kindness. But they also whispered, wondering why she always looked lonely. The harvest festival came one bright afternoon. It was the biggest community event of the year. Families gathered near the river, washing vegetables, preparing food, and setting up long tables. Children played games, old men told stories, and women laughed while cooking together. Mara hoped Cole would join her and maybe talk with her for the first time in days. But he left early, saying he had business in town. She stood alone by the river, washing corn slowly, trying not to look like she cared that her husband was not there. A group of women stood near her, chatting softly. One of them, Clara, noticed that Mara's hands were trembling slightly as she washed the corn. Clara had seen that same trembling before in women who carried heavy worries. She stepped closer to Mara and gently asked if she needed help. Mara shook her head politely, trying to smile. But her eyes looked tired. As the minutes passed, the women continued talking, but Mara stayed quiet. Her silence grew heavier, until finally she bent her head, and a soft sound escaped her. It was a sound of a heart trying not to break but failing. Clara touched her arm softly. "Mara, are you all right?" Mara covered her face with her large hands and shook her head. Her shoulders trembled. For a moment she tried to stop herself, but then the pain she had carried for months spilled out. She whispered in a voice so shaky that the women leaned close to hear her. "My husband never touches me, not even by mistake." Her words hung in the air like a stone dropped in deep water. The women looked at each other, unsure what to say. Mara continued, her voice weak and cracking. "He never sits with me, never talks to me. He walks ahead as if he is alone. I try to be a good wife. I try to cook, work, and stay quiet. But it is like I am invisible, like I am not someone worth caring for." Her tears fell into the river water. The women felt their hearts soften for her. They had seen her carrying heavy beams and lifting sacks alone, but they had not realized she carried a heavier burden inside. Not far away, a young farmer named Eli was helping set up tables. Eli noticed Mara almost every day when he passed by her home. He saw how she carried water barrels alone, while Cole sat under a tree doing nothing. He saw how she walked behind Cole on the road, with her head bowed. He saw how she looked at families in the valley, with quiet longing. He knew she was lonely, but hearing her break down that day made something inside him change. Eli was not the type to stare or whisper. He was known for his calmness, his patience, and his steady nature. People trusted him because he listened more than he spoke. When he noticed Mara crying, he paused in the middle of setting a table and took a step forward without thinking. Something in him felt strongly that she should not be crying alone. He watched as Clara and the other women tried to comfort Mara, offering kind words and gentle touches. Mara tried wiping her tears, embarrassed that she had broken down in public. She kept saying she was sorry for crying. But Eli knew she was not crying because of weakness. She was crying because she had carried loneliness for too long. When Mara finished washing the corn and quietly walked toward the path leading home, Eli's eyes followed her. She walked slowly, her shoulders heavy, her steps unsure. He wished he could say something, anything that would lift even a small part of that sadness from her. As she disappeared over the small hill, Eli felt a strong pull inside him, something he had never felt before. It was not bold or romantic or loud. It was the feeling that someone as gentle as Mara should not have to face life alone or feel unwanted in her own home. He didn't know what he would do yet. He didn't know how he could help her. But one thing was clear to him. He could not stand by and watch her fade away behind a careless man. Something had to change. And somehow, Eli felt he would be part of that change. The morning after the harvest festival felt strangely quiet in the valley. The sky was clear, the birds were active, and the river made its soft music as always. Yet Mara woke with a heavy feeling inside her chest. She remembered crying at the river the day before, and her cheeks grew warm with embarrassment. She hoped the women would forget what she had said. She hoped no one else had heard her confession. But there was someone who had heard just enough. Eli, the young farmer who had watched her from a distance. Mara tried to start her day normally. She swept the small yard, fed the chickens, and carried 2 big buckets of water from the stream. The buckets were heavy, but for someone like her, they were easy to lift. Still, her heart felt heavier than anything in her hands. Cole had returned late the previous night, without saying a single word. He had walked straight to bed and slept facing away from her. She had hoped he might ask about the festival, ask if she enjoyed herself, or maybe even apologize for not joining her. Instead, he simply acted as if she did not exist. Mara smiled sadly to herself as she washed the dishes. She wondered if this was what marriage meant in the valley: silence, distance, emptiness. She wondered if she was the problem. Maybe she talked too little, worked too much, or looked too different. Around mid-morning, she stepped outside with a basket of clothes to dry. The sunlight touched her face gently. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth calm her. When she opened them again, she saw Eli walking on the dirt road toward her house. Eli carried a small wooden toolbox over his shoulder and walked with calm steps. Mara froze, unsure whether she should wave or hide inside. She hoped he had not heard her crying, but deep down, she suspected he had. She tried to pretend she was busy arranging clothes on the line. Eli slowed down as he reached her gate and gave a soft, friendly nod. "Good morning," he said in his quiet voice. Mara returned a small nod. "Good morning. I noticed yesterday that your barn door hinge was loose," he said gently. "I came to fix it, if that's all right." Mara looked surprised. She had not told anyone about the hinge. She had planned to repair it herself later. "Oh, you don't have to. I can do it," she said shyly. Eli smiled lightly, not mocking her, just kind. "I know you can, but I'm already here, and it's no trouble." Mara hesitated, then nodded slowly. She stepped aside so he could enter the yard. She kept her eyes down, feeling awkward, unsure how to behave. Eli walked toward the barn with steady steps, opened his toolbox, and began working. He moved with quiet focus, not rushing, not bragging, not looking for praise. Mara stood a few steps away, folding clothes silently. She did not know what to say. She was not used to someone offering help without wanting something in return. In her mountain tribe, help was common. But in Cole's house, she had learned to do everything alone. Watching Eli work made her feel something warm, a feeling she had almost forgotten. After a few minutes, Eli spoke without looking up. "You work very hard, Mara." "Looks, Mara. You work very hard, Mara." She blinked, surprised. I just do what needs to be done." "You do more than that," Eli replied. "Everyone in the valley sees it." Mara turned her face away slightly, not wanting him to see how much those simple words affected her. No one had ever told her she worked hard. Cole had only ever told her what she needed to do next. Eli's words felt like sunlight on a cold morning. Eli finished fixing the hinge and tested the door. "There," he said. "It will not fall again." She thanked him quietly. He looked at her with gentle eyes, not pitying, just understanding. Mara did not know how to react to such kindness, so she simply held onto the basket tighter. Eli didn't stay long. He packed his tools, stepped back from the barn, and gave her a small nod again. "If anything else needs fixing, you can tell me." Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Eli walked away slowly, his figure shrinking along the dirt road. Mara watched him until he disappeared behind the trees. She felt confused. Why would he come help her? Why would he speak kindly when he had no reason to? She wondered if everyone talked kindly like that, or if it was something only he knew how to do. In the following days, Eli kept noticing small things around her house. A broken fence, a cracked water trough, a loose roof tile. He repaired them one by one, never asking for anything, never staying long enough to make her uncomfortable. He only spoke when needed, but every word he said was gentle. Mara began waiting for his footsteps without realizing it. When she heard him walking by, her heart felt lighter. She found herself standing taller, speaking a little more, feeling a warm spark inside that she had not felt since she left her mountain home. One afternoon, while Eli was helping her move heavy firewood, a soft rain began to fall. The drops were light at first, then stronger. Mara hurried to cover the logs, but Eli grabbed the other side and helped her lift the tarp. As they worked, Mara slipped a little on the wet ground. Eli reached out to steady her, not grabbing her, just touching her arm lightly. It was the first time in months that someone had touched her with care. Mara's breath caught. Not because the touch was bold or surprising, but because it was gentle. It reminded her of something she had long forgotten. A feeling of being seen. being valued. She stepped back, not out of fear, but because emotions filled her too strongly at once. "I'm sorry," Eli said softly. "I didn't mean to startle you." "You didn't," Mara whispered. I'm not used to kindness." Eli looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Rain ran down his hair and clothes, but he didn't seem to notice. He finally said, "Everyone deserves kindness, Mara. Especially you." Her eyes softened, filling with moisture that wasn't from the rain. She turned away to hide her expression, but Eli already understood. Days later, while Cole was away on another long trading trip, Mara found Eli repairing the broken steps outside her house. She stood beside him, unsure how to express everything she felt. Finally, she spoke in a shaky voice. "I must tell you something. Something I told the women at the river." Eli paused his work and looked at her gently. "You don't have to tell me anything that hurts." But she shook her head. She needed to say it. "My husband never touches me. He never even speaks to me kindly. I feel like I'm living beside a stranger." Eli's face didn't show shock, anger, or judgment, only concern. Real, human concern. "Mara," he said quietly, "no one should feel invisible." Tears filled her eyes again. But this time, they carried relief instead of only pain. She felt like someone had finally unlocked a door she had been trapped behind for months. She continued in a soft voice. "I thought maybe something was wrong with me. Maybe I was too different." "You are not the problem," Eli said, in a firm but gentle voice. "You are one of the kindest people in this valley." Mara covered her mouth as a small sob shook through her. She wasn't crying from sadness alone, but from the weight finally lifting. For the first time, she felt she had someone she could trust. Eli didn't step closer, didn't try to make bold promises. He simply stayed beside her as the sun set behind the hills, giving her company in a moment she had lived alone for far too long. When he finally stood to leave, he paused at the gate and gave her a soft nod. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Mara watched him walk away, and for the first time since her marriage, she did not feel entirely alone. She felt a new beginning softly rising inside her heart. She didn't know where it would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. Eli had stepped forward when no one else did, and that simple act was slowly changing her life. When the valley people learned bits and pieces of Mara's story, it spread slowly, like the soft wind that slipped between houses. Nobody said her name loudly or mocked her. Instead, there was a quiet sadness in the air. People had watched her for months, how she always tried to help, how she carried weight others could not, and how her eyes held a tired, hidden ache. Now, they finally understood why. Cole returned from his trading trip a week later. He walked into the yard, dust on his boots, coins in his pocket, and a bored expression on his face. Mara stepped out of the house and welcomed him softly, hoping maybe this time he would greet her properly. But Cole only nodded, walked past her, and dropped his bags on the bed. She offered him warm soup she had prepared, thinking maybe a gentle gesture might open a small door between them. But he barely looked at the bowl. "I'm not hungry," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was simply empty, as if speaking to her felt like a task. Mara watched him walk around the house with the same distance as always. Inside her heart, something ached painfully. After meeting Eli, after hearing simple kindness, after feeling seen even for a moment, the coldness at home felt harsher than ever. Later that day, Cole went into town to deliver goods. That was the moment when people finally saw the truth. He spoke loudly at the general store about work, money, and supplies, but he never once mentioned his wife. When someone asked how things were at home, Cole replied with a shrug, "Same as ever. She works. I trade." There was no warmth, no respect, nothing. People exchanged uncomfortable glances, It was one thing to be private, but another to treat your wife like a tool. A woman near the counter whispered, "He has no idea what he has. Anyone else would treat her with kindness." Cole overheard but showed no reaction. He simply picked up his things and left. Meanwhile, Eli continued helping Mara quietly, never crossing any lines, never speaking ill of Cole. He only did what felt right. He brought her extra hay for the animals, helped repair the chicken coop, and even taught her how to plant certain valley vegetables that she was still unfamiliar with. The more time Mara spent with him, the more she realized how warm human kindness could be. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. They simply worked side by side peacefully. But even those silent moments felt comforting. With Eli, silence was not cold. It was gentle. Eli's mother, a kind woman named Ruth, noticed her son returning home each evening with a thoughtful look on his face. She didn't push him for answers, but she could sense he was carrying something heavy in his heart. One evening, as she sat on the porch peeling potatoes, she spoke quietly. "You've found someone who needs help," she said without looking up. Eli paused, surprised she knew. "Is it that obvious?" "A mother knows," Ruth said with a soft smile. "And I've seen how you look when someone's suffering. You've always had a heart that listens." Eli looked away, unsure how to express the complicated mixture of concern and protectiveness he felt for Mara. "She's hurting," he said. "More than people know." Ruth nodded gently. "Then help her. Not by taking sides, not by causing trouble. Just help her heal. Sometimes, that alone changes everything." Those words stayed with Eli. A few days later, something happened that made the valley turn its eyes toward Cole more sharply. Cole returned home earlier than usual and found Eli in the yard, helping Mara lift a broken beam. Mara stepped back as soon as she saw Cole, nervous that he might misunderstand. Eli also stepped away politely, giving Cole space. Instead of greeting either of them, Cole narrowed his eyes at Eli. "To help," Eli said simply. "Your roof beam was splitting. It's none of your business." Cole replied, crossing his arms. Mara opened her mouth nervously. "Cole, the beam was close to falling. I asked." "You asked him?" Cole interrupted sharply. "Why didn't you wait for me?" Mara lowered her gaze. "You were away for many days." Again. Cole scoffed and walked inside the house without another word. Eli watched him go, but kept his expression calm. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want to cause conflict. He only nodded to Mara and said, "If you need anything, I'm nearby." When Eli left, Mara felt something inside her twist painfully. She didn't want problems between them. She didn't want to appear ungrateful or disrespectful, but she also knew she couldn't keep living in silence. That evening, Cole finally spoke, but it wasn't what Mara hoped for. While they ate in silence, he suddenly asked, "Why do you talk to that boy so much?" Mara felt her chest tighten. "He only helps. When things break, I didn't marry you to have another man doing my work," Cole said dryly. "If people keep seeing him around you, they'll start talking." Mara lowered her spoon. Her voice was gentle. "People already talk. They wonder why you ignore me." Cole froze for a moment. Then he placed his bowl aside and stood up. "I don't need to explain myself," he said, and walked outside. He left her sitting alone at the wooden table, staring at the untouched soup. She felt small, not because of her height or her size, but because she had no place in her own home, not in his thoughts, not in his heart. The next morning, when Mara went into town to buy flour, she noticed people watching her with sad eyes. Clara approached her quietly and asked, "Are you all right? We heard Cole shouted at Eli yesterday." Cole. Cole shouted at Eli yesterday. "He didn't shout," Mara said softly. "He was just upset." "But he shouldn't be," Clara replied gently. "Everyone sees how much Eli helps you." Mara's eyes softened. She didn't want gossip. She didn't want trouble. But the kindness from the women made her feel less alone. Later that same day, the town elder, Mr. Harding, stopped Mara near the well. He was an old man, with gray hair and a gentle smile. He spoke carefully. "Child," he said, "this valley is small. We see things. And many of us are worried about you." Mara's throat tightened. "I don't want people to worry. I just want to live peacefully." "And you should," he replied. "But peace requires fairness. And you aren't receiving that." Mara didn't know how to answer. She bowed her head politely and walked home, her mind spinning. She loved helping others. She loved being useful. But she also wanted something simple. Someone who cared. A few days later, the valley finally reached its limit. Cole had been drinking at the tavern and returned home in a bad mood. He saw Eli passing by the gate and assumed, without reason, that Eli was looking for Mara. In front of several neighbors, Cole raised his voice, telling Eli to stay away from his property. Eli didn't respond angrily. He simply said, "I only help when something needs fixing." Cole shouted again, calling him a meddler. The neighbors watching felt uncomfortable until Mr. Harding stepped forward and said calmly, "Cole, the boy is only helping because you don't." Cole's face went red with embarrassment and frustration. "This is my house, my wife, my business." "No," Mr. Harding said gently but firmly. "When a woman suffers, the valley sees it. You have a responsibility as a husband, not just to own land or earn money, but to show care." Cole opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. The truth weighed on him. Everyone knew it. He had not treated Mara with respect, companionship, or even simple human kindness. The valley stood quietly behind Mr. Harding. Not as attackers, but as witnesses. Cole realized for the first time that people were not blind. They had seen his coldness. Mara stepped out of the house slowly, her eyes wide, unsure whether to defend him or stand silent. But Cole looked at her, then at the people, and said nothing. He simply walked inside, leaving Mara standing alone in the yard again. But this time, she was not alone. The valley stood with her. And, most of all, Eli did. That night, Mara realized something had changed forever. Something inside her heart shifted from fear to clarity. She could not keep living this way, silent, invisible, forgotten. She did not know what decision she would make next, but she knew one thing with certainty. Whatever happened, she would not walk into the future alone. Someone had stepped forward for her. And now the valley had too. After the day the valley witnessed Cole's harsh behavior, everything felt different. It was not loud or dramatic. It was a quiet shift, the kind that settles into the air slowly and refuses to fade. Neighbors looked at Mara with more softness. Women invited her to join them during chores. Even children smiled at her more openly. But the biggest change was inside Mara herself. She woke the next morning with a sense of clarity she had never felt before. For months she had lived with confusion, wondering what she did wrong, why she could not be loved, why she felt unwanted in her own home. But now she understood something important. She had done nothing wrong. She had tried. She had worked. She had cared. And she had done all of it alone. Cole stayed silent the entire morning. He did not mention the argument. He did not ask if she was all right. He simply kept to himself, moving around the house like a shadow, with no intention of changing anything. Mara watched him, her heart calm for the first time, not from happiness, but from realization. She could not continue living like this, not when she had finally seen what kindness looked like, what care felt like. Later that afternoon, Mara stepped outside to fetch water from the stream. As she walked along the narrow path, she saw Eli waiting near the fence. He wasn't standing stiffly or nervously. He was simply there, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but his eyes full of quiet concern. She approached slowly. Eli spoke first. "I didn't want to disturb you," he said, "but I wanted to make sure you're all right." Mara looked down. "I am more clear than before," she replied softly. Eli nodded. "That's good. You deserve clarity." She lifted her gaze and searched his face. What she saw there was steady and honest, no pressure, no judgment, just concern. "Everyone stood up for me yesterday," she said. "Even you." "I couldn't watch you being treated unfairly," Eli answered simply. Mara felt something warm rise in her chest. Not excitement, not boldness, just peace. "Thank you," she whispered. For a moment they just stood there, the sound of the stream and the wind in the trees filling the silence. Mara felt something she had not felt in a long time. Safety. When she returned home that evening, she found Cole sitting at the table staring at the wall. He spoke without looking at her. "People are talking because of you," he said. "People are talking because of how you treat me," Mara replied calmly. Cole's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for you to go around telling everyone our business." "I didn't," she said. "They noticed because you made it obvious." Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was steady, like a gentle stone that wouldn't move. Cole looked at her finally, his expression somewhere between frustration and disbelief. "Do you want them to think I'm a bad husband?" Mara answered honestly. "You have treated me like I don't matter." Those words struck him harder than anything anyone in the valley had said. He looked away, unable to argue. Mara waited, hoping he might say something, anything that sounded like an apology, or regret, or even realization. But he said nothing. That silence told her everything. She walked outside and sat on the porch. The sun was setting in soft colors, painting the sky with warm oranges and pinks. Mara felt the cool evening air touch her skin and closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her mountain home, where people laughed loudly, worked together, and cared for one another. She thought of how far she had traveled, hoping to build a new life. She thought of how alone she had become, and then she thought of Eli. Over the next 2 days, Mara packed her belongings quietly. She did not have many things. Just a few blankets from her home tribe, some clothes she had sewn herself, and a small wooden carving her father had given her when she left the mountains. She folded everything carefully, placing each item into an old travel sack. On the third morning, she stood in the doorway and looked at the small house she had tried so hard to make warm. She felt sadness, but not regret. She had given her best. She had tried every day. But some paths were not meant to be walked forever. Cole stepped into the room just as she lifted her sack. He looked confused. "Where are you going?" he asked. Mara met his eyes calmly. "To a place where I am treated with respect." Cole frowned. "You're leaving?" "Yes," she said with quiet finality. "I cannot keep living with someone who doesn't see me." Cole opened his mouth as if to argue, but he stopped. Deep down, he knew she was right. He knew he had pushed her away not once, not twice, but every single day. He had taken her strength but ignored her heart. Now she was walking away, and he had nothing to say that could change her mind. For the first time, Cole realized the cost of his coldness. Mara stepped out of the house and walked toward the valley path. She didn't look back. Her steps were steady, her shoulders straight, and her heart filled with quiet courage. She reached Eli's family farm just as the sun rose behind the hills. Eli was out feeding the animals when he saw her walking toward the barn with her travel sack. He froze for a moment, trying to understand what he was seeing. When she reached him, she spoke softly. "I am leaving Cole's house." Eli set the bucket down slowly. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" Mara nodded. The elder said, "There is a spare cabin near your family's fields. He said I could use it if I wished." 1. Oh. Eli exhaled with relief and nodded. Yes, there is. And you're welcome here. My mother will be glad to have you close. Mara felt a warmth she hadn't felt in months. I don't want to be a burden. You won't be, Eli said gently. You never were. Together they walked to the small cabin. It was simple, but strong. The wooden walls were freshly repaired, the roof sturdy, and the small porch looked out toward a field of golden grass. Mara stepped inside and felt something she had been missing for a long time: belonging. Ruth arrived a short time later with warm bread, blankets, and a big smile. She opened her arms without hesitation. Welcome, dear, she said softly. You're safe here. Mara's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness this time, but of relief. In the weeks that followed, Mara slowly rebuilt herself. She helped Eli with daily chores, learned new valley traditions, and shared stories from her mountain tribe. Eli listened patiently, always with gentle eyes. He didn't push or pressure her. He simply stood beside her, giving her peace. Some evenings they walked together through the fields, watching the sun fade behind the hills. Their conversations were simple about crops, weather, small moments they noticed during the day. But those simple conversations meant more to Mara than Cole's silence ever had. One evening, as they walked along the river, Mara stopped and looked at the water reflecting the sky. She spoke quietly. Eli, thank you. You gave me strength when I felt very weak. Eli looked at her gently. You always had strength. You just needed someone to remind you. Her heart warmed at his words. She smiled softly, a true smile, the kind that reached her eyes, a smile she hadn't worn in a long time. Over time, the valley came to see Mara and Eli as two people who brought out the best in each other. She grew happier and more confident. He grew more open and steady. Their friendship deepened in a natural way, built on trust, kindness, and shared moments. And although Mara's journey had been painful, it led her to a place where she finally felt seen, valued, and cared for. The small cabin by Eli's farm became her safe home, and the valley became a place where she could breathe freely again. Her life had not ended with sadness. It had found new meaning, because someone stepped forward when she needed it the most. And Mara finally understood that kindness, simple, gentle, honest kindness, could change everything. She walked into her future not alone, but with people who truly cared. And beside her, always steady, always respectful, always kind, walked Eli, the young farmer who stepped forward when the world turned away.